it's funny because I think back to even like my studies, like going through school and getting a BCom and all that kind of stuff. Is like you learn about sole proprietor partnerships and corps, but to me, it really surprised me in our own practice, like how little partnerships there really are. Like to me, I
Yeah.
always kind of thought it was like, oh, it's one of the three options, but like we deal with like almost like no partnerships because like it's such a niche thing that it's only for like real estate partnership, like that, or maybe for
Hmm.
like a law firm or like a special kind of like practices. But even then they're moving away from that and they're moving towards professional corporations. So I thought that was
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's an interesting thing that we get like taught in school about one thing, but really it's not that common.
Well, yeah, and I think
um
when people first start businesses, I saw this a lot with junior entrepreneurs that I was working with. They just
mm,
assumed like, "Hey, can you create a partnership agreement?" Like that was a
yeah,
really
yeah,
common
yeah.
inquiry that I had, you know,
Yeah.
and so that's sort of the starting point of the conversation, and then I would steer them in a
Oh
bit of
yeah.
a different direction.
Or
Yeah.
people
So
telling me like, oh yeah, I have a partnership with this guy, and it's like, is
yeah,
it a partnership or is it like
yeah,
a corp, or is he just a subcontractor? Like,
yeah.
and it's just
Or
like
do you
there's
just
so much to it here.
exactly? Do you just have a services agreement with him? Yeah.
Yeah,
So I to just expand on my point, like I think
yeah,
there's other things that are just really important to understand from a legal perspective is what are the roles that you have within your business? Who is doing what?
right,
Like
yeah,
of course if you're just, one individual who's starting up, say, a consulting company and you
hmm,
have a bunch of clients, say you're a tech consultant and you're
hmm,
consulting on the use of software implementation or something like that, then things are relatively simple then, and the main sort of nexus of legal potential complications would be whether you're incorporated or not, and then of course what the agreement is between yourself and your clients,
right, yeah,
and so what the service delivery expectations are, what the how payment works, and
hmm,
what happens if one party wants to leave. So
right,
you always want to think with the end in mind, right? And
of
and
course, yeah,
business relationships are like any relationship, they will all end. you know, Whether
yeah,
it's through divorce, death, whatever, like it's gonna happen, and
yeah,
hopefully it's going to be amicable, and oftentimes it usually is. It's just the sort of relationship has run its course, but you want to think like what happens then. Do I need notice? Do I, like, if you're the consultant, like, do you want to have 30 days notice, 60 days notice? What happens to any invoices that are outstanding? um do you need to have a written reason for the end of the relationship? Just think about all those kinds of things, and then think about intellectual property as well. So
yeah,
if you're a tech consultant, like maybe you're doing a whole bunch of work inside of their system and bringing your knowledge to build out a solution inside of their company. Is
hmm,
that your solution? Are they able
hmm,
to retain that after the expiration of your work with them, or has that become
right,
more of like a licensing arrangement? Where they
hmm,
would pay you a fee, you're no longer
hmm,
involved, but they still get to use XYZ product that you've created for them. So these
yeah,
these are some of the questions that sort of come to mind. Just think about what happens when. Law is all about contingency planning, really, and answering
yeah,
those what ifs.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess speaking of what ifs, there's a big part of your work is around estate planning, right? So what if someone passes away and there's
Hmm.
transitions that happen, and I think I think back again to my schooling days, or even if you kind of do some research online, like a lot of the information is around individuals that don't have businesses, but business owners have such a different and complicated estate planning process, right? And so
Yeah.
I guess like what's the first thing you would kind of say to a business owner to kind of explain some of the differences to them?
Sure. Well, I think as for our listeners, it'd be helpful to just kind of understand like the basics of an estate plan for anybody.
Right. Okay.
Is really like, a will, and I won't spend too long on this, but like a will, a power of
Yeah.
attorney, and a representation agreement. So in
Mm.
different provinces across Canada, sometimes they're referred to by different terms. So a healthcare power of attorney is
Mm.
synonymous with representation agreement. A rep agreement is what's used in BC.
Okay.
So yeah, a will, of course, governs who's going to be your executor, who is going to implement your will, essentially, and then who's going to get what. So the distribution schema.
Oh yeah.
Power of attorney, rep agreement, those are incapacity planning documents. So power of attorney grants legal and financial authority to another person to make decisions on your behalf if you're in a coma. And a rep agreement, healthcare power of attorney, that does the same thing, except it grants authority to another person to make healthcare decisions. So what kind of treatments you might consent to, and and what sort of like care facility you might be in. Say, for example,
Mm.
if you have dementia or some other sort of long term illness. So I don't want, you can't gloss over those things, right? Like those
Yeah.
are really, really important for everybody, and especially for a business owner.
Hmm.
Going back to the power of attorney, like of course, like okay, you have your corporation. Who has access to the account? Who has
Yeah.
access to the bank account? Like if
Yeah.
there's no power of attorney in place and you don't have a business partner who also has signing authority, then your business could immediately come to a standstill at any point in life. And so this isn't just relevant to, a
Right.
mature business owner who's like, in their 50s or 60s and has like a really sophisticated enterprise. This could be relevant to the startup to the one person tech consultant who just started,
Yeah.
right? And they've
Yeah.
incorporated a company and they have a bank account associated with it. And then of course all their passwords, all their
Yeah.
credentials,
They have all the admin access to
digital,
everything,
yeah,
and
this
no
like
one else
digital.
does. Yeah.
Exactly. Like this sort of like custodianship over our digital artifacts and assets is
Hmm.
really, really important.